Hey everyone, I'm Shruti MN and welcome back to CodeForce Chronicles. Today we are going to talk about one of the most important foundations of Salesforce automation, business process automation using Flow Builder. If you are preparing for Salesforce admin interviews, if you are working through Trailhead, or if you are trying to understand when to use screen flow, record triggered flow, schedule triggered flow, or other automation tool, this session is for you. And I want you to remember one thing from the beginning. You do not become good at Salesforce Flow by simply memorizing flow types. You become good at flow by understanding the business problem triggers and the trigger behind the requirement. Today, I'm going to explain the concepts, give you real business scenarios, show you how to decide which flow to use, and then we will walk through how to create a practical screen flow. So let's get started. Before we talk about different flow types, let's understand what business process automation actually means. Imagine a company has a support team. Every time a customer calls, the support team manually collects customer information, follows up with the customer, and sends an email. If this process happens hundreds of times every day, there is a huge opportunity for automation. Instead of asking users to perform every repetitive step manually, we can allow Salesforce to handle part of the process automatically. This gives us several benefits. It can save time, reduce repetitive manual work, reduce data entry errors, improve data quality, and help organizations follow a consistent process. Here's an important point. Automation is not about automating everything. Good automation starts with understanding the business requirement. You should first understand the existing process, identify repetitive or error prone activities, and then determine where the automation can create value. That is how a business analyst and Salesforce professional should approach automation. Now, I want to give a framework that you can use in Trailhead, in interviews, and even in Salesforce projects. Before choosing your flow type, ask yourself three questions. Question number one: what is the business requirement? What problem are we actually trying to solve? Question number two: what triggers the process? Is the process triggered by a user, a record change, a particular time, or an event? And question number three: does a user need to interact with the process? Does the user need to enter information, make a selection, follow a guided process? Or should Salesforce handle everything automatically in the background? These three questions are extremely useful. For example, if a support representative needs to enter information through a guided form, we immediately think about it. Screen flow. If a if a record changes and Salesforce needs to automatically perform an action, we think record triggered. If the process needs to happen every Sunday, we think schedule flow, schedule trigger flow. So do not start with the flow type, start with the requirement. That is very important mindset shift. Now let's divide automation into two simple categories. The first category is interactive automation. This means the user participates in process in the process. The second category is behind the scenes automation. This means handles the process automatically based on a trigger. Think of it this way. Interactive automation is human plus Salesforce. Behind the scenes automation is Salesforce plus automation. Let's start with interactive automation. Screen. First automation tool I want to understand is ScreenFlow. A screen flow is designed when a user needs to interact with Salesforce through screens. Think about a customer support representative. A customer calls and says, I have a technical problem. The support representative needs to capture customer name, email, issue type, priority, and description. Instead of asking the representative to navigate through multiple Salesforce pages, we can create a guided screen flow. The user sees a screen, enters the information, clicks next. The flow can process the information, And then the Salesforce can create or update records. This gives us a very simple architecture. User, then screen, then collect information, then flow logic, then Salesforce record. Here's my first flow design tip. Do not ask users to enter information that Salesforce already knows. If Salesforce can retrieve something automatically, don't make the user type it again. For example, if the flow starts from a specific account, you may be able to use the context rather than asking the user to manually type the account name. The goal is less typing, fewer clicks, better data quality, better user experience. Let's start our let's take our screen flow example one step further. Our business requirement is a support representative needs a guided way to create a custom support case. The required information is customer name, email, issue type, priority, and issue description. Once the user submits the form, Salesforce should create the case. Now let's think like a Salesforce consultant. Before creating the flow, I would clarify the requirement. Who launches the flow? What information is required? Which fields are mandatory? Which values should be controlled? Which Salesforce object should be created? What happens after submission? And what should the user see if something goes wrong? The questions are important because flow development should start with a clear requirement, not with dragging elements onto the canvas. Now let's compare this with an auto-launch flow. An auto-launch flow does not use screens to collect user information. Think about a button called generate customer summary. 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 A user clicks the action. The flow runs. If it performs the required logic and produces the result. There is no guided result. There is no form click asking the user for multiple inputs. So the important distinction is screen flow. User interacts with screens. Auto launch flow. Flow executes without screens. A useful interview question is what is the difference between screen flow and auto launch flow? A strong answer would be a screen flow provides an interactive user interface for collecting information. An auto-launch flow runs without screens and is used when the process does not require a guided user interface. This is much better than simply saying screen flow has screens. Auto-launch flow does not. Explain the business reason. Now let's talk about formal approvals. Imagine an employee submits a purchase request. The request cannot simply be processed immediately. It needs manager approval, then perhaps finance approval, and then final approval. This is a formal approval process. The key word here is approval. There is a defined process. There are approvers. There may be different levels of approval, and the record moves through that process based on the organization's rules. So remember, formal business sign off. Think approval process from an interview perspective. If you hear words like manage approval, finance approval, multiple approval levels, formal sign off, approver, think about approval automation. Now let's move to the second category, automation that happens behind the scenes. Automation that happens behind the scenes. This is where Salesforce can react automatically without requiring a user to complete a form. The first one is record triggered flow. The second is schedule triggered flow. And the third is platform event triggered flow. The easiest way to understand these is to focus on trigger, record, time, event. Let's look at each one. A record triggered flow runs when a record meets the configured triggered conditions. For example, when an opportunity is created, when an opportunity is updated, or when a record is deleted. Let's use a real business example. An opportunity becomes closed one. The business requirement says automatically create a work order and notify the owner. Does the user need to open a screen? No. Does the user need to manually click a button? No. The opportunity changes itself is the trigger. So our process becomes opportunity, then stage becomes closed, then record triggered flow, then create work order, then notify owner. This is the key idea. Record change triggers automation. Now, an important practical tip. Do not automatically trigger a flow on every record update. Think carefully about the entry conditions. Ask what exact change should start the automation. Can I restrict the flow to one, only the records that actually need processing? Good automation is not just about making run something run, it's about making it run at the right time and for the right records. Now let's change the trigger. Instead of record changing, what if the business says every Sunday at midnight, find stale leads and process the ones that have had no activity for 6 months? What triggers this process? Not a user, not necessarily a record update. The trigger is time. That is where scheduled triggered flow becomes useful. Think daily, weekly, monthly, or another appropriate schedule. A simple mental shortcut is time equals the schedule triggered flow. Here's a practical tip. When designing schedule automation, always think about volume. How many records may be processed? How often should the automation run? And whether the business really needs the process to run that frequently. Do not schedule something every hour just because you can. Choose a frequency that matches the actual business requirement. Platform event triggered flow. Now let's look at platform event triggered flow. This one is slightly different. Instead of a user changing a record or a block reaching a specific time, the flow responds to a platform event. Imagine another system sends an event to Salesforce. Salesforce receives the event and the flow responds so visually. System, then platform event, then flow, then automation. The key word to remember is event. If the interviewer says the automation should execute when Salesforce receives a platform event, your brain should immediately think platform event triggered flow. This is especially useful when systems need to communicate asynchronously through events. Now let's put everything together. This is the cheat sheet I want you to remember. Guided user input, screen flow, manual action without screens, auto-launched flow, record change, record triggered flow, time-based automation, schedule triggered, event received, platform event triggered, formal approval process. And here is my favorite question. Whenever someone gives you a Salesforce automation requirement, ask what triggers the process. That question alone can eliminate several incorrect options. Now let's stop talking about flow and actually build one. We are going to create a simple flow. Support intake, case intake flow. A requirement is a support representative should be able to enter customer information. Salesforce should create a case. Let's go into Salesforce from setup. Search for flows, open flow builder, select new flow, and now we have to make our first decision. Which flow type do we choose? Remember our three questions. What is the requirement? What triggers it? Does the user interact? Yes, the user needs to interact. So we choose screen flow. This is an important moment. Do not choose the flow type randomly. Choose it based on requirement. Now let's create a first screen flow. I'll name it customer information. The screen will collect the information required from the support representative. We'll add customer name, email, issue type, priority, and description for the issue type. I recommend using control choices rather than unrestricted text. For example, technical issue, billing issue, account issue, other for priority low, high, medium, high. Why do I recommend this? Because data quality matters. If the users enter free text, you may end up with high priority, urgent, very high. Now your reporting becomes messy. Control choices help standardize information. Pro tip, whenever possible, design your flow to prevent bad data instead of fixing bad data later. This is very important Salesforce design principle. Now we have collected the information, but our business process is not complete. We need to create the case. So after the screen, I'll add create reports, element, and configure it to create a case. Now we map the information collected by the screen to the appropriate case fields. For example, issue type maps the case field type, priority maps to case priority, description maps to case description, and relevant information goes into the appropriate case fields. This gives us one of the most important flow concepts. Screen components collect information, flow eliminates perform logic, create records, create information. Remember that architecture collects process. Now let's improve the user experience. After creating the case, I do not want the user wondering, did my request actually submit? So I'll add another screen, I'll call it success and display the confirmation message. Your support request has been successfully submitted. This seems like a small detail, but user experience matters. A technically correct flow can still be a poor solution, but if users do not understand what happened, so remember, do not just build automation that works, build automation that users can understand. Now test the flow. Now we test the flow. I'll enter the customer information, select the issue type, choose the priority, enter the description, and submit. Salesforce processes the information, the case is created, and we receive a confirmation. This is why testing is important. Do not assume that the flow works simply because it appears successful. Test the actual business scenario. That's valid input. That's missing information. That's different service. That's what happens when a record cannot be created, and make sure that the user experience makes sense. 3 interview scenarios. Scenario 1. Opportunity, then close one, and then work order. Scenario 2. Every Sunday, and then stale leads. Scenario 3. Support rep, that is, and guided flow, and then guided flow. Now let's turn your Now it's your turn. I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. Pause this video if you want to answer before I reveal them. Scenario number 1. An opportunity becomes closed one. Salesforce should automatically create a work order. Which flow? The answer is record trigger. Because the record change is the trigger. Scenario number 2. Every Sunday, Salesforce will process daily. Which flow? The answer is scheduled trigger flow because time is the trigger. Scenario number 3. A support representative needs a guided form to collect customer information. Which flow? The answer is screen flow because the user needs to interact with the process. If you understand those three, you are already building the right mental model of flow. Interview question. A service representative needs to enter customer information through a guided wizard and create a case. Answer: screen flow. Why? Because user interactions like guided data collection. Now let's make this interview ready. Imagine the interviewer asks a Salesforce representative needs to enter customer information through a guided wizard and create a case. Which automation tool would you choose? Your answer: should be screen flow. Do not stop there. Explain why. Say, I would choose screen flow because the requirement involves user interaction and guided data collection. That is much stronger interview answer. You're showing the interviewer that you can understand the business requirement, that you understand the business requirement, not just memorized a definition. And if they ask, what if the opportunity becomes closed one and the automation should happen automatically? You say record trigger. If they ask if it needs to run every Sunday, you say schedule trigger flow. Always connect. Requirement trigger then to. Remember, user interaction means screen flow, record change. Let's summarize everything. User interaction, screen flow, record change, record triggered flow, time-based process, schedule triggered flow, event received, platform event triggered flow, formal approval process. And remember, the goal is not to memorize a list. The goal is to understand the relationship between business requirement and the automation trigger. That is the skill that will help you in trailhead certifications, interviews, and real Salesforce projects. And here's the biggest takeaway from today's session. Do not learn Flow Builder by simply memorizing elements. Learn it by understanding the business problem. Identify the trigger, determine whether a human needs to interact with the process, and then select the appropriate automation approach. That is how you start thinking like a Salesforce professional. Want to learn Salesforce Flow in depth? Join my admin course. My name is Shruti Amit. I'm a Salesforce coach. My email address is shrutinarasi@gmail.com. If you want to go beyond this introduction and learn Salesforce Flow in depth, include real business scenarios, flow builder, screen flows, record triggered flows, automatic logic, debugging, best practices, interview questions, and practical Salesforce admin concepts. I also teach Salesforce administration through my admin course. If you are interested in learning in a structured and practical way, you can reach out to me. My name is Shruti Amit. I'm a Salesforce coach. You can email me at shrutinarasi@gmail.com. I repeat, shrutinarasi@gmail.com. Or you can DM me with your Salesforce learning queries. Whether you are preparing for your first Salesforce role, working toward your certification, learning Flow Builder, or trying to become more confident with Salesforce administration, I would be happy to help you understand the concepts step by step. If this video helped you to understand Salesforce flow, please like the video, subscribe to CodeForce Chronicles and share it with someone who is learning Salesforce, especially someone preparing for a Salesforce admin interview or certification. I'm Shruti, your Salesforce coach, and this is CodeForce Chronicles. Keep learning, keep building, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next Salesforce tutorial. Happy learning.